Marry me, Annie here, and the topic for the YouTube Pagan Challenge for this week is how did you find a matron patron? The glasses are coming off because of the reflection of the light above me. I do have a matron. I'm in search of a patron. I don't even know if I've mentioned that on my channel before. Well, I am. Let's go back to matron to start with. In my first circle, we were required to align to a deity who could be our matron or our patron. It was part of what was understood as our spiritual maturation, of understanding who we were partnered with, who our allies were. In a way, it was a way of acknowledging a combination of our strengths and the things that needed to be strengthened within us. I watched everybody else around me come up with a matron or a patron immediately. A working partner, click of fingers, and he had his patron. I was enjoying researching all kinds of gods and goddesses and being open to being tapped on the shoulder, but it wasn't happening. I was limited within a pantheon because we honored the Greek gods in our circle. So, nothing happens. Everybody else has got their partnership up and going. Our circles were busy with an awful lot of attendees, and I was flying solo. It was a really awkward time for me. I felt like somehow I was failing, that what everybody else did easily, I had a problem doing. Well, the good side is I certainly learned a lot about a lot of gods and goddesses, because basically I was encouraged by my priestess to just read and collect history and mythology, archaeology. It was before the internet. Look at picture books of Greece and the islands and see what inspired me and see what moved me, and just let it happen organically. Don't decide when was going to be and then force it to be so. And in the end, what I didn't realize is all along my matron had been making herself present. It's Hestia. There are no images or statues, truly, of the ancient Hestia. There were some statues and stuff that came on later. Of course, lots of things in time, both with statues and images, but she had an unknown face. And I couldn't put a face to my matron. And then one day, I'd read about Hestia, I think, a time or two. She seemed kind of, I don't want to say minor, but I just couldn't find any distinguishing features at the emotional level that stood out to me. And then one day in meditation, I realized that the flame that I was looking at, it was an oil lamp on the altar at our covenstead, was my matron. And then I started remembering all the studies that I'd had where she was mentioned as the flame of the hearth, the flame of the heart, the flame of the community, the flame of the town. And I realized that I had been connected to her, but because I couldn't give her a face, I couldn't see eye to eye, literally with her, I didn't recognize her. And my epiphany that particular night was she was the flame, and she was the flame reflected within me. Well, of course, then I became avid and read everything I could get my hands on about Hestia, and she has proven to be, I want to say, a true lifesaver in the very real and tangible sense, and an inspiration and a challenge for me all the years that she has been part of my life, and that would have been since the early 70s. My devotion to her is absolute. My love for her is absolute. My respect for her is absolute. And when I'm devoted to love and respect, the highest aspects of myself, it's her within me that I'm connecting to. Oh, at some other point I'll probably talk about that relationship more. For this, it's more, for this video, more about my suggestion to those who are searching for a matron or a patron, or multiple matrons and patrons. Just be aware of everything you study and go on a search and find what intrigues you and look for a combination of a deity which you already feel reflected in you. Maybe you share some of the same strengths, or our deities often have feet of clay, some of the same challenges. And then look for what within those deities is also what would encourage us to be our highest, best self. And that's going to be different for each and every one of us. We aspire to something different, and we're something different to begin with. I thought it was a done deal. That would be Hestia and I. I begin and end every one of my meditations with her. I begin and end every one of my rituals with her. That was enough. She's been present for me in so many different ways. And then Kuan Yin made herself known to me at a time at which I was lacking in compassion. It wasn't necessarily that I needed compassion. I needed to be compassion. I had a lot to learn about that. She came into my life for a very specific reason, and her presence in my life was an intimation of something that was to come. The more I learned about compassion and the greatest possibility of what it could be, I started having a sense of the understanding of unconditional love. Now, for a lot of people, that's exactly what Kuan Yin represents. Not exactly for me. There were so many different aspects of her to connect to, and there was a sense of that without the specifics of that. And that was probably in the early 80s that she made herself known to me. Every decade, someone new has joined to support me, and added to Hestia and Kuan Yin. In the early 90s, Parvati showed up. Totally unexpected. Oh, I know a bit about a lot of Hindu gods and goddesses. I knew a little bit about her, more her in relationship to Durga and Lakshmi and Kali, but not an awful lot. Oh, that she was the mother of Ganesh, but I didn't know a lot about her specifically. And then I went to a Hindu temple with a friend, and when I found myself in front of her statue, I literally fell to the ground. Later, from that position, in great embarrassment, but I was overwhelmed with a feeling of being loved to a greater degree than I could possibly begin to understand. She came into my life at a time at which I needed to be loved. Kuan Yin came into my life when I needed to be more free in expressing my love. Parvati came into my life when I needed to be loved. I need to be in the embrace of something I could just feel gentled within and calmed within, with no expectations. It's an aspect of Kuan Yin that a lot of you will relate to. To me, it was Parvati. And she has, the three of them, Hestia, Kuan Yin, and Parvati, have stayed so much a part of my practice. I'm trying to do something intentional in this decade. My relationship to the God of the Wicca, as I relate to him, as I see him, as I feel him, as I believe him to be, is deep and intimate. And I fear it is so all-consuming that it's limited my opening up to the possibility of God, the male, in other forms. And I set out in this decade to open myself up to the possibility of what patrons could bring to me. I've not made a lot of progress in that. It kind of reminds me of the early times when I was researching and reading and being inspired through poetry and all kinds of literary sources and art, and even photographs of the land from which various gods came. It's the exact same thing I went through when I was exploring what would eventually become my relationship with Hestia. And that is happening now with the way I'm called to explore the masculine divine. And this is outside of all the aspects of the masculine divine that are part of the wider collection of what the god of the Wicca might be. And it's been interesting. It's been interesting. And I'm looking forward to, because I'm quite sure it will, what rises from that, whether it's a singular entity that I feel I need as part of my life, or whether, like with Hestia, Parvati, and Kuan Yin, I meet a fella or two that will teach me and guide me, show me what I already have that is of him, and what I can aspire to, which is of him. It's been an interesting journey, and I've actually found it a bit frustrating because it just seems to me that the goddess shows up in so many aspects and by so many names in my Wiccan studies. And he comes up kind of as a singular entity that has all of his appearances. So the god of the rut, the innocent child, the lord of the greenwood, the king, the sacrifice, the lord of the underworld, without specifically naming him the way we name the aspects of the goddess. I've found it a hard time to find within the Wiccan structure the names to him that I would like to explore. But it's going good. And I have immersed myself within and become very attached to new aspects to consider in light of who the god might be. And not so much necessarily in relationship to the goddess, but who he is as a distinct entity in his own right, perhaps not even connected to her at all. The god of the Wicca to me will always be who he is in relationship to her, because it's who I am in relationship to her. But what's been interesting is exploring the possibility, without feeling threatened as a woman, of a complete and separate encapsulation of the male divine that stands alone. I've even been wanting to name that aspect because it feels to me that's who I am being called to explore. Haven't found the right name for that, no less a specific name to a deity that represents that, but the journey has been well worth my time, has been very fascinating, and I've already learned a lot about myself in the process. A little bit about matrons and patrons. Who knows if any additional matrons will become important to me, especially as I grow older. But I have set out in intent that at least one patron will become an important part of my personal spirituality and my practice. I wish you all mirth and reverence. Mary Part.